My friends, this morning, two improvised bombs were detonated just meters from the hotel of the President of France in Damascus, Syria. Macron's entourage had just left the scene only minutes, maybe even seconds earlier. 18 people were injured, four of them police officers, and the French president continued with his schedule as if nothing had happened. If I saw it right, someone tried to reach the president of France in the heart of Damascus on the day he was making history as the first head of state from the European Union to set foot in New Syria, or Syria Nova. And I'm going to show you who profits from this bomb, because the answer isn't obvious. But hold on, because that wasn't even the only message delivered with explosives in the last few hours. In the early morning in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's Revolutionary Guard fired missiles once again at commercial ships. A Qatari gas tanker, an oil tanker from Saudi Arabia. And the detail that changes everything, the ships were sailing exactly on this route I'm showing you here, which the Americans escort. We're seeing an escort right now in real time happening here. This is an American escort that's happening at this very moment. These are real-time images, folks. That route, this is the alternative route right along the coast of Oman, which we've already talked about here on the channel in the last few live streams. Iran fired once again at this detour. And just a few hours later, the Iranian foreign minister showed up with a paper in hand, invoking a provision of the agreement. I'm going to read you this article here, and you'll understand why this demand coming right after those missiles is the most shameless thing of the year. And there's still the third act. Trump's plane is in the air right now, on its way to Ankara, Turkey, carrying what his own advisors are calling a bag of gifts for Erdogan. And inside that bag is exactly what Netanyahu begged for yesterday not to happen. Yesterday was the message, today is the answer. And I'll show you here both ends of what's happening straight from Israel, folks. Straight from Israel. And to wrap up, I saved a revelation about Khamenei's funeral that directly affects anyone who consumes content online. This is very important. The regime set up a camera trick and hired 400 people to carry it out. Anyone who leaves halfway only comes away with the headline. Staying until the end reveals everything. It's all a trick, folks. And before we start, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because on a day like today, it's this channel that puts the pieces together for you, straight from Israel, right where everything is happening. Let's start right here, straight from Damascus, folks. Macron arrived in Syria for a historic moment after the Assad regime fell in 2024, for those who still remember, right? Bashar al-Assad fell in 2024. No head of state from the European Union had visited the country, and he didn't go alone. He brought a high-profile delegation with him. The heads of the largest companies in France, including the energy giant called Total and the country's biggest shipping company. To put it in the context of that picture, France went to Damascus to talk about reconstruction, billion-dollar contracts, and money. Macron even posted on social media, quote, "I am here to affirm France's commitment to the Syrian people for a sovereign Syria, united in its diversity and at peace with its neighbors," end quote. That was what Macron published. And then, in the middle of this historic visit, two bombs. The first one went off shortly after his entourage left for the presidential palace, in a very busy area between the Ministry of Tourism and the National Museum, in front of the hotel, where he had just finished meeting with local leaders and representatives of the Syrian people. In other words, it was a small miscalculation that kept him from being hit. The second one exploded just a few meters from the first, next to an ambulance that was already helping the victims. Guys, look at this. Keep this detail about the second bomb in mind, because it's a signature and a very clear one. A double bomb with the second one timed to hit those who run to help. It's a classic method used by terrorist organizations. This isn't the work of amateurs, guys. It's people who know exactly what they're doing, people who know what they're doing. The Élysée Palace reported that Macron didn't even hear the explosion, that he was already on his way to the meeting with the Syrian president, and that the schedule went on without any changes. And now, the question that matters. Who benefits from a bomb like that, or from two bombs like that, right there at that exact moment? No one has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. No one, no terrorist organization, for now. So, what I'm going to give you here is the map of suspects, not a verdict, okay? Just based on what we understand, based on the map, right? The new Syria of President El-Sharan, or El-Jolani, is full of internal enemies. Remnant cells of the Islamic State, groups linked to the old regime, to Bashar al-Assad, and militias that Iran supported for decades and that lost their jobs when Assad fell. And just look at the pattern. This was the second bomb in Damascus in less than a week. I went over what happened last week for you. Last Thursday, A cafe near the Palace of Justice was targeted by an explosive device, and 10 people lost their lives at that location. I also covered this here on the channel. That's why it's important to evaluate everything that happens around this region, not just in Israel, guys. Everything around Israel is very important because it's all connected. Someone is sending a message to the world, to the whole world. Someone is sending this message: the new Syria is not safe. Don't bring your presidents, don't bring your billions of dollars here. And who benefits the most from an isolated and unstable Syria? Think about it with me for a moment. Who lost Syria when Assad fell? When Bashar al-Assad fell, who was the one that lost? Iran, my friends. And I'm not saying it was Iran. There's still no proof. But when you look at the rest of today and what Iran has been doing in the last 24 hours, you'll understand why this question isn't a conspiracy theory, it's reading the board. Because now we're going to the Strait of Hormuz. This is what you're seeing on the map in real time. We're watching a US escort operation unfold right now. And there's no mystery there. Those missiles have a return address. In the early morning, the British Navy agency that monitors maritime traffic reported a ship was hit by a missile near the coast of Oman and caught fire. It was a gas transport ship from Qatar. Hours later, confirmation came that a second ship was also hit, an oil tanker flying the Saudi Arabian flag, and an American official confirmed to the press it was Iran. At least 2 missiles were fired at commercial ships crossing the strait. And now, pay attention to the geography, because that's where the scandal lies, right folks? As we've already discussed here in the last videos, the ships have stopped, practically stopped, using the Iranian route through the strait. This route up here. This here is the Iranian route. Close to Kersh Island here. We're talking about this new route down here, okay? This is the route that Iran said everyone needed to use. They started sailing along the alternative route close to the coast of Oman, with the American military increasing flights in the region precisely to protect this passage. Look here, the American military is patrolling the area. The same thing as always here. You can see it here, look. It's happening all the time, guys. 24 hours without a break. In other words, exactly to protect this passage. And those ships that were hit today were on this route, on the Oman route, okay? That route there. In other words, Iran didn't shoot at those who disrespected its rules. Iran shot at those who tried to escape Iran's rules. And the message is clear. There is no alternative route. Either you go where the Revolutionary Guard tells you to, asking for permission, of course, as they require, or you don't go through. Do you remember the Strait Authority? That authority that was created by the Iranians, which they set up to control the Strait of Hormuz? Do you remember the toll that was announced publicly? Well, today the final version of the charge came. Anyone who tries to get around it gets a missile to the head. That's exactly it, folks. First, the demand came in writing, and today it came by missile. Piracy has taken off its mask, and the list of the pirates' protégés, the list we laid out here yesterday, got its mirror image today, the list of those being punished. Because Iran's foreign minister also declared that Germany will have to pay for what they've been saying about the Strait of Hormuz. Look at that, folks. Pay. Now they're going to have to pay the price just for speaking badly. They spoke badly about Iran or declared freedom in that region. In other words, the country that criticized the toll out loud is now in line for punishment. Those who swear loyalty sail with a discount. Those who criticize pay more. Now it's funny, right? Saudi Arabia is right now taking part in the funeral, the burial, the interment of Ali Khamenei. Qatar is also present, and they're being hit in the Strait of Hormuz. What a shame, right, folks? But it's not just a toll anymore. It's a toll with a behavior chart. There's a chart there. If you don't behave properly, you get a missile in your face. If you behave well, you're fine. And if you think you've seen it all, let me bring you today's cherry on top. A few hours after the missiles, Iranian Foreign Minister Aragash went public, and you can already imagine that he came to explain the launches. You probably thought he came to discuss missile launches, right? Actually, he came to pressure Trump. Take a look at the statement he published himself on X. Quote, Article 13 of the Memorandum of Understanding is clear. Negotiations on the final agreement will not begin if the threats continue. Respect your own signature. Addressed to Trump. Respect what you signed. End quote. The country that fired missiles at 2 commercial ships this morning is demanding that the other side respect the agreement, and the demand has a specific target. That interview with Trump from yesterday, which we also showed here in yesterday's video, where he said either the deal is closed or the job is finished. For Tehran, this was a threat, and a threat, according to Article 13, blocks the final negotiation. Look at what the United States got themselves into, guys. No kidding. How can there be an article like that where threats aren't allowed? How does that even exist? And the guy still signed it. So write down the score. Today, write the score. Since it's World Cup season, the score. Iran shoots at a civilian ship at dawn and demands the agreement be honored in the afternoon. And it didn't stop there, guys. The Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council responded to Trump with a speech that reveals the real tone behind these terms, or behind the suits, right? The suits. The main message was as follows, quote, "To the President of the United States who suffers from delusions and who today threatened 91 million Iranians, I say, speak to the Iranian people with respect. Otherwise, we will respond in another language." And in the middle, end quote. And in the middle of the message, he also resorted to historical provocation. He called the United States, pay attention, he called the United States a country without roots, with only 250 years of history, trying to erase a civilization, the Americans, a civilization thousands of years old, which is Iran. And he said that the last time Trump used that tone, the result was total failure, impotence, and Trump asking for a ceasefire. We respond in another language, he said. And stop right there because he used exactly the term, guys, that I've been repeating here on this channel for a long time. I always say, in the Middle East, you need to speak the language they understand. And when I say this, I'm not referring to Arabic or Persian or Hebrew. I'm talking about the language of brute force, the only one that this region truly respects. And now, the Iranian regime itself has confirmed through the secretary that there is another language and they speak it fluently. And what would that other language be? This morning gave the answer. The language spoken was missile against ship. And here I'm going to give you my opinion straight, guys, because this channel isn't just about reporting what's in the news. I need to tell you what I think about this. Look, what Trump has done so far, every time Iran pulled the trigger in the Strait, he hit radars and launchers in this region here of the Strait of Hormuz, right? That's all Trump did. It was always the same thing. Always the same response. Always at the same location. And the result is on your screen. Iran fired once again. In other words, they don't care about this at all, guys. That means when the response doesn't change, the aggressor does the same calculation again. And if you ask me what I would do in Trump's place, my answer wouldn't be at sea, but inside the regime. For every ship hit in the Strait, an important figure from the regime would be taken off the board. One ship, one name, two ships, two names, three ships, three names, and so we go on. That's the price announced in advance. To announce. The next ship you hit, someone there will cross over to meet the supreme leader. Something like that. It has to be exacted, people. Exacted. It has to be done this way. It's the only language they understand. Because the regime replaces radar and launchers in a matter of weeks. A top-level figure can't be replaced just like that. In the Middle East, those who respond in kind are respected, and those who respond with a weaker hand are tested again. And to wrap up today's Iranian situation, a statement from Iran's own army, which almost went unnoticed, but in my view is the most serious of all. In an official statement, the Iranian army declared the following. Today, folks, not yesterday. It wasn't last week. These are current statements, okay? For those who asked about today's date, it's the 7th, folks. July 7th, Tuesday, local time 1356, 13:13:56. 13:56. Quote, look at what the army declared. We took advantage of the ceasefire period to improve our military capabilities and now declare we are ready for a long-term conflict. End quote. Listen to that sentence again, everyone, calmly. They confessed. They are confessing in writing that they used the truce to rearm themselves. This is exactly what the satellite images we analyzed here in this video also showed. Construction work on that shady mountain, movements in Fordo, reconstruction at an accelerated pace. But now you don't need satellites anymore. The regime itself signed off saying they are ready for a prolonged war, a long war. The truce that the world called a path to peace, the Iranian army calls it a break for training. And the training isn't just about missiles. A digital security report revealed today that a hacker group linked to Iran is targeting technology companies and Israeli government agencies with a new technique. Pay attention, especially if you work in Israel or for a government agency. Take a look at the technique. Malicious software, right? A hacker program disguised as a legitimate update sent as if it were coming from the victim's own technology provider. That means you get an update for your phone, for Android, from Google itself, and you click it, but it's not really them, okay? The same thing happens on Windows, the same thing on Mac, an update from the company itself. Look at that, guys. In other words, very sophisticated, right? While the negotiating table waits, the regime works in 3 languages at the same time. missiles in the water, construction in the mountains, and viruses in the computer. And with that background, now we move on to the third act of the day, because while the missiles were flying over the Strait of Hormuz, the American presidential plane is arriving in Turkey. Trump lands this afternoon in Ankara for the NATO summit, which starts today and ends tomorrow. The official schedule is precise, scheduled to land at 2:10 in the afternoon, local time, there in Turkey, at an airport reserved just for Trump. A ceremony with state honors, a private meeting with Erdogan at 3 p.m., and in the evening, a leaders' dinner hosted by Erdogan himself. It's the first visit by an American president to Turkey in 11 years, and he left the White House last night for this, okay? That's what he did. And what he brought in his luggage is at the center of this story. The White House advisors themselves had been calling the package a bag of gifts. And when a reporter asked Trump in front of the NATO Secretary General if he was bringing a big bag of gifts for Erdogan, he confirmed it, yes, without hesitation, folks. He added, take a look at what he said. Quote, I'll probably do something that will make him very happy, end quote. In other words, Erdogan. And what's inside the bag? Are you asking? The New York Times revealed it, citing 4 government officials. 4 Trump administration officials. Trump is expected to inform Erdogan that he is ready to restore Turkey's access to the F-35 program, the stealth fighter jet. The same one from which Turkey was expelled in 2019 when it bought the Russian defense system. Remember that? I made a video about exactly that. They couldn't have that fighter jet there because they would study, right, what its weaknesses are or how to detect it on radar anyway using the Russian equipment. And Reuters also published its own investigation confirming Trump is expected to support the sale of F-35s to Turkey during this visit. And again, despite Israeli concerns, right, Israeli concerns were heard, recorded, noted, and ignored if this happens. If you watched yesterday's video, you're likely feeling the weight of this moment too. Because yesterday, on the eve of this trip, Netanyahu went on US television to issue a public warning against exactly this sale. He described Erdogan as a man who openly calls for the end of Israel, talks about taking Cyprus, threatens Greece, and dreams of invading Jerusalem. And he concluded by saying that the Muslim Brotherhood government does not deserve the F-35. That was yesterday, Netanyahu speaking. And today, newspapers in the United States are saying that Trump will signal the opposite course. Israel's message was delivered on Monday, and Washington's response came on Tuesday, wrapped in a gift bag. And there's another layer to this whole story, folks. Here's Trump explaining why he attended the summit. See his comments. I'm going to this summit out of respect for President Erdogan. If it weren't in Turkey with Erdogan, I probably wouldn't have gone. End quote. He didn't go because of NATO, he went because of Erdogan. He says it himself. Impressive, right, guys? Erdogan's best friend turns out to be Donald Trump. And another thing, last week he wrote on social media that it's ridiculous for the United States to keep going down this one-way street with its allies, that they weren't there for the Americans. In other words, Trump arrives in Ankara at odds with the very alliance that's going to sit at the table with him. That's exactly it, because they weren't with him. Here's how the world's largest military alliance meets at Erdogan's place. Now note another key point. Signaling isn't the same as delivering, folks. It's not delivery. Between Trump's promise and the fighter jet actually landing on the runway over there in Turkey, there's still a big obstacle called the US Congress, which banned the sale while Turkey kept the Russian system. But tomorrow they could just say, I don't want the Russian system anymore, right? I've already removed it from here. It's not here anymore. I sent it back to Putin, and then they'll have to consider that possibility. But for now, the system is still there. The report itself mentions heavy legal barriers, so Erdogan can leave Ankara with the promise, but he still doesn't leave with the plane. But in geopolitics, a signal is also a commodity, and today's signal says Israel's warning didn't change the White House's course by a single inch. And Zelensky is also arriving in Ankara to meet Trump tomorrow in the middle of the summit. And he is also arriving, we could say, wounded, right, in the literal sense. Because in the early hours of yesterday, Russia unleashed on Ukraine's capital one of the biggest air offensives of the year. 68 missiles and more than 350 drones in a single night. At least 20 people lost their lives. Entire residential buildings collapsed. A family was pulled from the rubble today. And you probably haven't even read about this anywhere, right? And the reason for the scale of this attack has a target. Zelensky himself pointed it out. It was calculated to happen right after the United States holiday and right on the eve of the NATO summit. A message from Moscow to the table in Ankara, but Ukraine was barely able to shoot down almost none of it, and Zelensky explained why. They're missing the interceptor missiles, the famous Patriots, which actually don't even work that well, right? And this is where it intersects with Iran. Look at that detail, right? The conflict in the Middle East, according to reports, has drained the global stock of these missiles. And the ones paying the price for this shortage are Europe. It's Ukraine. Ukraine actually isn't even Europe. So Zelensky goes to Ankara with just one request: defense missiles, and he's going to sit in front of the man who controls the spigot on those missiles, Trump. And Gaza, you're asking me about Gaza, right? You must be wondering that now. Because yesterday's video was almost entirely about the handover of the government, right? Hamas surrendering, Hamas handing over the government. Well, today's chapter confirmed point by point what we said yesterday about laundering the arsenal, about changing uniforms without handing over the rifles. Today, a Hamas spokesperson explained the real purpose of this announcement. Look at what he said, folks. Today, we are putting the ball in the mediators' court so that they pressure all sides to bring the National Committee into the Gaza Strip. End quote. The ball is in the negotiators, the mediators' court. It's a pressure move, my friends, said in no uncertain terms. And an Israeli expert, a reserve colonel who served for decades in Lebanon and also in Gaza, summed up Hamas's announcement on the radio today with an expression that needs no further analysis. He said that this is just throwing sand in everyone's eyes, that there's nothing real in what they said. Sand in the eyes? Yesterday we called it swapping out the sign, each with their own image, everyone seeing the same trick. And tomorrow there's the Cairo talks. Remember Cairo? It's happening tomorrow. The one we also flagged here yesterday, letting you know. The Palestinian factions are meeting with the mediators to try to unlock phase 2, so keep an eye on that. And from Lebanon, another crack between what's on paper and what's actually happening. There's an agreement, a framework agreement, right, signed between Jerusalem and Beirut, stating that the Lebanese army will dismantle Hezbollah's structure in the south. And today the Israeli press revealed what the commanders of the Israeli army think about this plan. They doubt that the Lebanese army will follow through. Here's why, and regular viewers already know this, but for newcomers or followers who haven't heard it before, I'll explain again. Look, just do the math, folks. A high percentage, that's what was said on TV here today, a high percentage of Lebanese soldiers are Shia, and some of them sympathize with Hezbollah. Asking this army to dismantle Hezbollah is like asking a brother to disarm his own brother or a cousin to disarm his cousin. It's more like a nice-looking agreement with questionable execution, right? A very beautiful document for the press, but its execution will probably end up in Israel's hands. So put this news in the same bucket as Hamas's announcement, because it's the same thing. And now comes the part I saved for you, the revelation about this funeral. And I saved it on purpose because it speaks to you in a way that no other news today does. Pay attention. The Iranian regime confirmed through the head of the Islamic Culture Organization. Are you listening, folks? The Iranian regime itself confirming, okay? The head of that Islamic Culture Organization said in an interview, pay attention to what he said, folks, that the Revolutionary Guard brought about 400 foreign influencers to the funeral of Khamenei. 400 influencers. Hired, invited, with the trip organized by the regime. Did you hear what I said? 400 influencers. And there's a detail that stings for Brazilians too, because among these influencers invited by the regime, there are Brazilians. People who accepted the invitation, the paid trip, and the platform the regime gave them that the crowd itself used to call for the death of Western leaders, of Trump, of Netanyahu. I'm not going to share my opinion on those who switched sides. Instead, I'll leave a question for you to answer yourself. What makes a content creator become a showcase for a regime like that, right? One that did what it did to its own people. So remember those faces. You know who I'm talking about. If you know who I'm talking about, leave their names in the comments so everyone else knows who these people are too. Remember those faces. History will remember who chose which side to film. Pay close attention to that, everyone. And what is all this for? The regime's own leader explained it. To show the world the ceremony's true, authentic image. According to him, the mainstream media distorts things, so the way is to use influencers and content creators to show the truth. And he also bragged about the result. Guests from 30 countries attended, And according to him, even Trump would have been surprised by the number of heads of state who are present. It sounds like a modern speech from someone familiar with the internet. But then comes the very well-known Israeli researcher here, who was also born in Iran, a specialist in the Iranian regime, from one of Israel's main institutes, and he breaks down this facade with a very simple question. Where were the influencers in January? Because in January, when the protests took over the streets of Iran, the regime didn't invite any bloggers, any influencers, anyone to show the correct and authentic image. In January, the regime shut down the internet nationwide for nearly 3 months. Do you remember? In Iran, Iran's internet only opens back up when the regime controls the narrative. Whoever is present is being controlled, and the Iranian press has also revealed behind-the-scenes funeral details. The procession started earlier than planned today because of confusion with the invitations. The route of the cortege changed several times. Each change was announced by a different official. Businesses were forced to close and restaurants were ordered to prepare free food for the population, paying out of their own pockets. Look at that. And these guys went there to record it, right? The Brazilian influencers, folks. Remember these names, okay? Remember these names. And the final analysis from the expert here in Israel, looking at the images, he said that the crowds were considerably thinner than the camera angles suggested. A crowd, right? From that camera angle, it looked like a lot of people. Free food by decree and 400 content creators' content. Imported to film everything from the right angle. This specialist said the following. When you see the Islamic regime being helped by the Western media and by influencers, it means they are desperate. It means they are weak and that the people do not want them. End quote. That's the specialist's conclusion, and I agree, adding my perspective as someone who works online too. When the content is strong, truly strong, you don't need to hire 400 people to say that it's strong. A video is enough. If it's real, genuine, and strong, it spreads on its own. It does the job by itself, the job that 400 people can't do. So let's recap the day together, guys, because the pieces fit together. A bomb tries to scare the West out of Syria, right? That's what happened today. Missiles teach the world that in the Strait of Hormuz, there is no alternative route. We're seeing the Americans here now. Here, look. These are the Americans, okay? The Chancellor demands respect for their role just hours after the shots were fired. The army admits it used the truce to rearm itself, while hackers from the same regime target computers in Israel and the United States. The American president brings gifts for the man Israel calls a threat. The Lebanese army is officially given a mission that Israeli generals doubt it will fulfill. And the regime buries the leader with a crowd that was edited, and with a hired influencer. 7 scenes in a single day, and all of them tell the same story. The distance between what these actors show to the world, these influencers, and what they really are. That's why the next few days are valuable. Write this down, guys. Tomorrow, the second day of the summit in Ankara, the Trump-Zelensky meeting, the final answer about Turkey's F-35, and a meeting that brings this video full circle. Okay? That will happen there too. Trump will also sit down with President El-Jolani of Syria. The same man Macron was visiting today, or is still visiting today, when the bombs went off in Damascus. Tomorrow there will also be the Cairo talks on Gaza. On Thursday, the 9th Khamenei's body arrives in Mashhad and the funeral ends. And the final round of negotiations between the United States and Iran, which was scheduled for after the funeral, is now officially in doubt, because Iran has activated Article 13. If it doesn't happen, the timer we set here keeps running on its own, folks. August 16th, the 60-day deadline hits 0, okay? Don't forget that. And then I ask you, an agreement where one side shoots at a ship and the other side sends a gift bag to the neighbor, is this agreement alive or dying? Tell me, folks. I've already given my answer in the last videos. Today, Iran did its part with 2 missiles, and there's a word in Hebrew that perfectly sums up the behavior of the Iranian regime, folks. Perfectly. Hatzpan. That's it, folks. Hatzpan means shameless. It's shameless, folks. It's the limitless audacity of this regime that's elevated to an art, right? They did it as if it were an art. Shooting at a ship in the middle of the night and demanding respect for the agreement at lunchtime, that, my friend, is Hatzpan. Pure shamelessness. If this video showed you what the headline hides, leave a like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with your family and work groups, because there are a lot of good Brazilians out there stuck on the headline and also on those channels of those guys who went over there, okay? So wake up, people. Wake up. Everyone there is being paid to do this. Let's go to the comments quickly. 30-minute live stream. It was long today, huh, folks? Thank you. A lot of news. They armed Iran. Now they're going to arm Turkey. If you have Trump as a friend, you don't need enemies. I partly agree with you. I really do. I truly agree. Okay? What Trump is doing with Turkey is unbelievable, folks. It's unbelievable. What is Trump's real interest in Turkey? It's unbelievable. If he hands it over, but we know. Let's make one thing very clear here about the F-35. And Israel has also just bought another batch of F-35s. They're only going to receive them in 10 years. In 10 years, folks, do you think the F-35 will still be relevant? Do you think the F-35 will still be the fighter jet of the moment? Or the F-22? Of course not, right, guys? In 10 years, just imagine what's coming next. So what Trump is really doing is selling. Consider this. Trump is selling fighter jets that will be outdated in 10 years. That's what's being sold. He's selling, in my opinion, okay? Given how science and technology are developing today and how fast they're moving. He's selling junk, guys. Junk as if it was something new. That's what he's doing, okay? Making money. Something that in 10 years, you know, guys, look at today's technology. With artificial intelligence, something new comes out every 2 days. Imagine what will happen in 10 years. They're going to get the same F-35 as now, with some updates. But in 10 years, maybe war will only be fought with drones. These fighter jets already fly by themselves, or maybe they won't be needed anymore. We won't need this kind of fighter jet anymore. Probably. Your live stream was brief and very enlightening. Thanks, Ruth. No, there are people who can't watch until the end. There's nothing I can do, guys. They can't watch until the end. They leave without understanding anything, right? Then they end up on those guys' channels, the ones who travel to go to Iran. And why isn't there an alternative route? Because their pieces have always been the same. At least since the coup, they should have changed and never bought oil from that country. Who really buys oil from Iran? It's mainly China, guys. It's China itself, the biggest supplier. This is the route that was developed by the United States, actually, to go through this region. Iran's route is up here. And then you see, these guys here are paying Iran. They're paying Iran to pass through. Look. All of them here. No one gets through without paying, guys. Paying. And here is the route without paying, but with the risk of being hit by Iran. The United States is doing this job right here, look. It's probably these two ships here, the two small green ones. And here are the Americans. Of course, if you click on it, it won't show that it's American. But it says it's a tanker ship, but it's not a tanker ship. This is a destroyer. These are American ships. They use this kind of identification to confuse the radar or whatever. You can't really confuse the radar, but based on the location, you can see these are American ships. And this one isn't American. I don't know what flag this is. I don't know what flag this is either. But they're taking these two ships. My friends, that's it for the live stream. If anything major occurs in the Middle East, I'll return right away. Okay? At any moment. And you can see it. Every day something serious is happening. Every 12 hours, big things happen here in the Middle East. Hugs to everyone, to all the friends of Israel. See you next time. See you on the next live.